perfect. We'll give Brian a sec. All right, well then let's call this committee meeting to order. Let's see. So our first thing is we need to appoint a committee chair. This would be a great opportunity for somebody to consider the powers that be should they become board chair in the near future. But I'm happy being committee chair if nobody else would like to do that.
I'm also willing to, Adrian, especially since unless it's not a conflict, since I'm on the resource link. I'm not a voting member there, but I am a participant on that.
Okay, that actually sounds really good. I'd support that.
I'm game.
All right.
Perfect. All right. So it looks like David's our chair.
There you go.
Right, then.
That was easy.
I take some of the load off Adrian since he's already bowing out of the next part. So, all right. Well,
I'm game.
All right. Perfect. All right. So it looks like David's our. Oh, somebody's got the live stream audio coming through.
Sorry, that was me.
I wondered what that was. I was like, I never been here already.
I'm having deja vu.
So it sounds like we need to go through the charter renewal process as the next step. I was reading the current charter, which is due to expire, looked like July 1st or June 30th, one of the two.
Probably June 30th.
June 30th. And we had gotten some input from the Resource Link folks that they would like us to go ahead and try to renew the charter rather than postpone it. Apparently there's an option if we don't do anything, the current charter we'll go ahead and continue until, I guess, whatever period of time that we decided to move forward with it. But Leslie Traynor had a recommendation that she would like us, if possible, to go ahead and look at renewing or updating the charter. So I don't know if everybody had a chance to look at it already. It looked fairly straightforward to me. So I think too, I don't know if there are some recommendations that are coming out from the administration about some changes in it. Brian, did you have some thoughts and ideas about that?
Well, I just, anytime you see a charter with a 7-year timeline on it, that's longer than we've ever had it before. I'm not sure what the 7 years is all about. And the only other concern I have is that just because of the craziness of what's been going on, we haven't really had an opportunity to really dig into it and look at it and see if there's anything in there that we would look to potentially change. The program itself has been very positive and a very good part of Coos Bay School District and a viable option for a lot of our homeschool families. But there's some quirks in it. When you look at a charter, it's a little bit different than your general charter. Like, for instance, the Lighthouse Charter, and the fact that they are, they're a standalone charter, and we are their sponsor district, which is similar to what we would do with Resource Link. The only difference is, I think in the two is that Resource Link staff are actually part of our bargaining unit for our teachers and classified staff, which is different than most charters you see. And we haven't had an issue by any means, but it opens the door of somebody, if we did reduction in staff or reduction in force, folks in that bargaining unit who are in the charter school would have an opportunity to bump into one of our other schools, which, I don't know. I mean, it's different than any charter I've seen or heard about out there as far as that's concerned. I don't know. We've never had an issue with that piece, but could it potentially cause an issue? I don't know. I mean, it could. We never thought 3 months ago that we were going to be looking at trying to reduce a budget either.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know.
Brad, I don't recall, was there a request for a 7-year time frame for this next renewal?
I think it was, yeah. I think the new one was a request for 7. And I'm not sure why 7, that number, as opposed to, normally it's a 5 or something like that. I don't know why 7. That one just struck me as odd.
Mm-hmm.
That it would be 7. I don't know, Adrian, James, you got any thoughts on that? I don't know.
I feel like 7 years is a long time.
Yeah, I'm not sure why it was set at 7 years either. It seems like a kind of an oddball number if it would be 5 years, 10 years, whatever that happened to be.
Yeah, what's our current one, Shelby, that we have? I know you sent that.
It's 5.
Is it 5?
Yeah, it's 5. And I mean, I guess if I'm understanding our discussion today, part of is to have our internal discussion about what we want to do moving forward, and then we would have a discussion with them and negotiate the points and talk about the things that we were unclear. So certainly if we thought 7 years was too long for us in terms of planning, we could certainly suggest a shorter time frame, or at least hear them out about why they picked 7 years as opposed to 5 or 3 or 10 or whatever else.
Sure.
So we've got a couple of things that we should probably discuss. One is going to be with the ongoing budget concerns, our facilities and everybody moving facilities, and then any potential impacts with the Resource Link staff being in our collective bargaining agreement. I did review this contract as well as our Lighthouse charter contract. The two are very different. This one's very short. It's only 8 pages. The Lighthouse contract is like 33 some pages and includes some addenda for insurance and other things like that. And what makes the Resource Link charter so short is our district provides a vast majority of their services. We provide their HR services and a lot of the business services, curriculum services, things like that. So in that sense, Resource Link is very integrated with our school district, whereas Lighthouse is a very separate entity.
Yeah, I agree with you, Adrian. There were the couple things that I looked at as well. Obviously it is a fairly short agreement, and I wasn't sure if I think if I remember correctly, it basically provides them an 80% of the money that we get from the state, and then the 20% I assume we withhold to cover the costs of all the services that we provide. And I wasn't sure, is that a workable percentage? Does that allow the district to pay for those services, or do we end up having to take some funds from other parts of our budget to do that. So I had no idea whether that was a good figure or where that came from.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, it's fairly standard for charter schools to receive, I think, 85% for pass-through money for ADM, and then 15% for the district to do. I think that's what we have currently with potentially with Lighthouse. I'm not sure, but I'd have to look at. I haven't had a chance to. Candace is kind of knee deep in budgets right now, and we haven't had a chance to really break it down and see if 20% is covering the costs of some of the things some of the services that we're providing. The other thing is I wasn't around. I was in the district, but I wasn't in administration at the time when Resource Link was developed in our district, and I look at what the future may hold for our district as far as a hybrid learning platform, which really is what Resource Link is. It's majority at home and with support 1 or 2 days a week as they come in the building. We're rapidly moving towards needing to have something like that in place in our school district on a much larger scale. I don't know if and I don't know if we. I guess I don't know if there's a need for a charter school, or if we just incorporate Resource Link as an alternative program in the Coos Bay School District. And we expand upon that. What's that?
What would that entail? Making that happen?
Well, I don't know for sure. I haven't looked and investigated it, but I think any program, it falls within the guidelines of an alternative program, similar to destinations, and it would be, I think we could easily put it under the umbrella of alternative programs in our district, because I fear that we would, with the possibility of us needing a blended learning platform on a larger scale, that we would be duplicating. If we were to start our own blended learning platform, we're just duplicating the Resource Link program. Whereas if it were just our district program, we just expand on it and build upon it.
Okay, so I'm was looking at the Lighthouse Charter. The Lighthouse Charter actually receives 90% of our, or 95% of our funds, which is different. 80% is more typical, and I think part of that is because they are so independent and they're doing a lot of their other services. My concerns with integrating the Resource Link program into our school district would be those families who consider themselves homeschool families. There is a small but very adamant group of people who are homeschooling their children, and Resource Link helps provide them with services that they can't provide at home, and I think they would be more comfortable using those services of that independent charter rather than something that would be another program of the Coos Bay School District. So that would be my biggest concern with kind of incorporating them into our existing stuff, even though we are providing, except for the teachers in the classroom, almost all of their back-end services.
So I guess I would probably say that if that is the case, that we truly look at an independent charter, which the current charter agreement really is a combination of the two, which is where it's kind of in the middle somewhere. because I could see us really needing to have a blended learning platform going into next year on a fairly large scale, just because of the fact that we're going to have families that are not they're not confident sending their kids back to school. If we do open school, they're not going to be confident sending their kids back. They're going to be looking for something similar to what we're kind of doing right now, with maybe a little bit more opportunity to check in the building with the teacher, not on a daily basis. There's a lot of talk. Yesterday's COSA ODE meeting with superintendents, there's a lot of talk about districts having options for families coming in the next fall, just because there's going to be a lot of either the fact that we're not going to be able to offer school as usual, or the fact that folks are not going to be confident sending their kids to school as normal, or the fact that we're going to have some staff that are not confident coming back to a building full of kids and people. And so, right now we're in the process as a district of trying to identify those staff members who are being really successful with distance learning, so that we maybe potentially have them as an option as we start to look at next year and build our options for next year.
Yeah, I do agree with Adrian in the sense that I think there are parents and families that really
Sure.
feel that allegiance to that their own charter, having their own sense of direction in terms of how the school is set up. And to me, it seems like in some ways, ResourceLink isn't big enough to really operate without the support of the district, maybe in some ways, unlike Lighthouse, which really started off that way. And so, I think, it sounds to me like, from what I understand, this was born out of a cooperative effort that the district recognized that there were some families that would be best served this way. And yet this district also wanted to retain a connection to those families for the community as well. And I'd hate to totally upend that, given the fact that we may have to make some significant short-term changes in our instructional methods over the next year.
Sure.
If it looked like it was a permanent thing that was likely to happen into perpetuity, and we were having to make these changes, then I might think, then we're going to be much more aligned with how they're doing. But I don't necessarily get that sense that this is, permanent in that way.
No, and I agree that there is that population of our homeschool families and faith-based families that are really connected to that particular program.
And I think I would wonder if the charter school would be able to retain the teachers and the resources if sort of they were spun out sort of independently on their own. And they certainly get advantages from being under the district that I think has created some stability within that program. It may make us feel like we want a shorter term agreement so that we have a chance to reevaluate, more closely than, 5 years or 7 years from now.
Sure.
I was also curious about the building scenario and some of the things that are built into the contract around providing a space, and I just wonder, does that look doable as it's written, or is that liable to create some problems for us as a district?
Well, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it reads that the district will provide space as long as space is available.
Yes.
I think is what it says. So I don't see a problem with that. We've continued to provide space. for them. I think if they were to grow, that it could become a little bit problematic. And I could see, I mean, they've always got a waiting list of folks wanting to get into the program, which, if it was to grow and expand, we could have a problem potentially with space. But as of right now, we don't. I mean, we've not had a problem space wise.
And ultimately, if we did, we would have to give them notice, and it would really become their problem in terms of having to locate.
Yeah.
That,
I mean, it's really the only, other than Lighthouse, it's the only other option for elementary kids. And I think we're going to have probably a fairly good sized handful of elementary parents and families, because of our current situation, that would really like a blended learning platform, which either is going to be accomplished by, either Resource Link expands, or we develop that platform within our district, which again is kind of a duplication of efforts, but we're going to have to do what we have to do to keep our families and keep our kids and support those that really have come to appreciate or like the blended platform and are a little bit nervous about maybe going back to school in the fall.
mm-hmm.
I was just looking for an enrollment report. We didn't have that in our last meeting. How many Resource Link students do we have? It's generally there's not a large graduating class.
I think there's about 75 to 80.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's what I recall.
75 to 80 kids.
I think it was a little down this year too, from if I remember correctly.
A little bit in certain pockets. Certain grade levels. Yeah.
So one thing for this meeting is that we had originally 90 days from when we approved the renewal request, which was January 27th. The 90 days was on April 26th. So what we need to propose to Resource Link when we talk in a group with everybody together is to either extend the negotiation period, extend the existing contract, or like you guys said, that it continues to operate on the existing contract. We just have to decide whether we're going to do negotiation later, do negotiation now, or try to amend the current contract to extend it.
Say that again, Salva. So we have to give them some notice about in a timely way about whether we're going to take one of those actions.
Well, we originally had 90 days to negotiate the new contract according to our administrative regulation. The 90 days is passed, but both parties have been understanding given our current situation. We just need to decide if we're going to mutually continue to negotiate and just extend that period, or if we want to try to amend the current contract using the existing one and just extend the expiration date.
I see.
And that was Leslie's concern regarding extending it to a later time. That remind me, Adrian, what did she say that they had going on in about a year?
Oh, they're going through their certification process. So they don't want to have to go through the certification while negotiating a new contract. I believe that's what it was. I'll check it out right here.
I think that sounds
Oh,
correct.
their accreditation years next year.
Right.
And so they consider it a hardship to try to accomplish both in 1 year, which is a reasonable concern.
Yeah.
Rental department, you have a call on line 1, please. Rental line.
Okay. So, oh, never mind. Go ahead, David.
I was going to say, is there any sort of initial sense of what we might recommend? I mean, it sounds like there's a couple of options. I mean, we could certainly recommend that we just leave the existing contract in place until we have a period of when we want to negotiate it. We could potentially agree to try to extend it as is for some period of time. Whether it was a year, even though that might not be great. I mean, I assume it could be extended for a longer period of time. Or do we want to take on the process of trying to sort of renegotiate it sort of from the bottom up, depending on, what concerns we might have and what changes we might want to incorporate into it and what changes they might want to see incorporated.
So I guess a big question to ask in that regard would be, how well is the Resource Link program working for our students? So it seems like the current setup is working fairly well for those families. They've had a fairly steady enrollment. I just found the numbers. They were at 72 during our last enrollment update. They were at 77 the year prior. So they've been holding pretty steady. If that process is working fairly well and we haven't had any major issues, trying to make them a more separate entity is a large amount of work for what wouldn't be a lot of gain. We might consider just noting if we have any minor changes that we want to make in their contract. So we talked about the renewal term. We're going to accommodate them with building space as far as we have available. They're doing well with the funds that they're receiving, and that's because we are providing a lot of their other services and whatnot. And the only issue that I've really heard come up a couple times is having their employees being part of our collective bargaining agreement. And while it hasn't caused any problems, it has the potential to cause some issues. As Brian mentioned, if we're in a position where we need to do a reduction in force, then potentially a long-term employee who's over Resource Link could be taking over a position elsewhere in the Coos Bay District. And I don't recall it being a big issue during our collective bargaining agreement negotiations, although there's always an item or two that involves Resource Link that ends up being added to or removed from the contract just because of their operations and their staff being part of that collective bargaining agreement.
I would say the program's successful. If you look at the graduation rate, it's not great, but there's a lot of reasons for that. When you talk about it, some of them are around the fact that some of the families involved own businesses, and the kids basically drop out prior to graduation and just go to work in a family business. Some of the families don't necessarily place a high priority on a high school diploma. They're looking at that homeschool piece, and so there's those factors. But when you look at the raw number, being below 50%, that's not encouraging when you look at the end result. But as they move along, they're successful. It's just, their ninth grade on track number is pretty good, but then the graduation number drops. So that somewhere in that span, we lose some of those kids as far as statistically. And again, I don't know that that's a huge negative, other than that it reflects on our graduation rate as a district. But that's something we've had going on ever since the beginning of that program.
And it would likely happen if they were within our regular district student population as well.
Sure.
So,
sure. And so that's not a reason to look for, any change necessarily. although we would like to see a little higher graduation rate. I think this year we may see one, but it tends to fluctuate quite a bit, depending on the families that are involved.
I do know from my meetings with them that it's something that they're very much aware of, and that they focus a lot of their efforts on trying to make some improvement in that area. So I do get a feeling that they're on board with trying to make the improvements in the areas they can. But I think you're right about some of the normal challenges that they're facing.
Yeah.
Anything from you, James, on that? On what direction you might recommend?
I just feel like trying to renegotiate right now would be a pill. It would be a big task to bite off. Mm-hmm. After hearing everybody's thoughts on the merging the two, I don't see that as being a viable way to go right now either. But realistically, I mean, from my perspective, is I feel like extending it where we've been right now, extending that out would be the best thing. But it sounds like it's a hard hit for them because of this situation with that they're going through in a year. So how far can we extend that out? We can just continue where we're at today, because what's working is working right now. We really don't know what the future holds for us. Right now, we're so on the fence. It's just, we're playing it by ear. We don't really know where they're going to be at. I know. As far as going with a 7-year, that doesn't sound good to me at all.
So, well, everybody's kind of up in the air right now regarding budgets and what's going to happen over the next few years. I think it would be reasonable to propose to them that we do what's in effect, say a 2-year contract extension. They can get their accreditation done next year without the pressure of having this hanging over their head. We really don't have a lot of things that we'd want to change in this contract. It's worked for us. It seems to be working well for them. We've got a couple of minor issues, as mentioned with the collective bargaining agreement. Like maybe we can meet and just discuss that and say, hey, this is a possible concern for us, and these are the reasons why. But we don't have a huge reason to start changing a lot of stuff. I mean, it's a pretty simple contract as is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and our collective bargaining agreement is set at least, not except for whatever MOUs come in place. It's set for 2 years anyway, right? Isn't that right, Brian? Is it 2 years?
No, the certified is only 1 more year.
Oh, did we only do 1 year this time? Oh.
They opted for a 2-year contract instead of a 3-year.
That's right. Yeah, I think that sounds like a reasonable approach too, Adrian. I would think that the 2 years, if we look at 2 years, it gives them a chance to get through their accreditation. We would also be in a position where we would hopefully be through our current crisis and kind of know more clearly what our future looks like. I do think, even if this COVID completely clears up and there's a vaccine, I think many families and individuals have learned some lessons about what works, what's doable, and what's not doable. And so I think there certainly could be some permanent changes in terms of more sort of online programming as a result. I would not be surprised to see some of that occur.
Yeah, and I, really the part about being in the collective bargaining agreement and the bargaining unit, as long as it went both ways, so that potentially a person from one of our schools could move into a resource link position but I don't think it does right now. I'd have to get that clarification, because right now it appears that it only goes the other way, and that they hire their people, but yet their people are part of our certified collective bargaining unit. So I don't know how that two-way works. I mean, there may be somebody, in case there's a position that opened up at Resource Link, we've got people that now have had a taste of blended learning and might say, you know what, I kind of like it. I wouldn't mind bouncing into that position or being able to transfer into that position. But I don't think they have the capability of doing that. I don't know that for sure.
So it looks like on here it just says the Resource Link Board shall be involved in the decision-making process in the employment and movement of Resource Link personnel.
Yeah.
So that sounds like it could go either way. It's just a question of, you know, how much would you really want to fight it if there's people who want to move or don't want to move.
Yeah. I mean, it's if we're all in the collective bargaining agreement unit together, it would make sense that they're all in it and could be interchangeable.
I think we could have that discussion with them, Brian, just to see what their understanding is.
Sure.
My guess is since they are on the collective bargaining agreement together, that there probably is no separation. I can't imagine the bargaining unit agreeing to different rules for different members based on different places where they work. The whole point of the bargaining agreement is they're working together, and generally you have pretty clear bumping rights.
1312.
Sure.
And I don't recall anything in the bargaining agreement that made any separation in that area.
I don't either. And that's, I would just want to get that clarified
Okay.
through the process.
I would back that 2-year plan. I like that 2-year idea.
Yeah. There's so many unknowns right now.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
So next steps, do we want to see if we can narrow a couple of dates for us that we can propose to Resource Link, be able to schedule with them as a group?
Yeah, I think that sounds like a reasonable plan.
Next week, Wednesdays or Fridays, I know David had said those days usually work. Resource Link says the afternoon is good for them. Is Wednesday or Friday anytime after 1? I can propose, or is there a better time?
Yeah, my schedule's open.
So that would
Unless
be the 20th or 22nd?
Yes. Let's see.
Yeah, those work for me as well, Shelby.
Okay.
I mean, we might not want to do Friday. I mean, I don't although maybe nobody's are going anywhere for Memorial Day.
I was trying.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind going camping somewhere.
I think the parks are, at least the county parks are open. Brian, you could probably get a reservation somewhere. I don't know about the state park yet, but
China Flats is open. I was just up there.
Hey, there you go.
I'll see if Wednesday works then. And James, anytime 1 or after works for you.
Yeah, unless one of you guys wants to come by a car during that time.
Good job, James.
You gotta try. Closed mouth don't get fed.
Perfect. I'll go ahead and get that.
We have the 1 o'clock. I've got the 1 o'clock on that date for the out-of-zone interdistrict transfer conversation with the
That's right.
principals.
I'd have that too. Right at like 2:30 or 3 then maybe.
I'm easy.
Yeah, that afternoon's free for me anytime.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anytime for me is good as well.
Yeah, let's shoot for 2:30 probably.
2:30. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'll check with Leslie and the Resource Link members, and then get the information out and go from there.
Sounds good. Shelby, were there other things on the agenda? I can't see the agenda.
Nope, that was it. Just the schedule and kind of getting a feel for what we wanted to do moving forward.
Okay. And then after the discussion, then we would make recommendations to the full board at that point. Is that correct?
After we talk with Resource Link group, yeah.
Yeah, so we're technically a negotiating committee, so we have the authority to hammer out this contract with Resource Link and then present that to the board for approval.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Anything else for good of the order before we close? All right.
No.
Then,
Thank you, David.
I call the meeting adjourned.